look, we've had a lot of focus, certainly in the wake of the Sarah Everard case, of focus on what women have to put up with in the street, wolf whistling, catcalls, harassment, pestering, women being followed, etc. I don't think it is happening every nanosecond to every single woman, but it happens too often to be acceptable. Not that any time is acceptable. Should it be criminalised, though?
Absolutely not criminalised. And the fact that you rightly pointed out that it's been discussed in the context of Sarah Everard, the problem with that is that you actually can end up in a situation where you describe boorish behaviour in terms of public, lewd, as you say, catcalling or what have you, and imply to young women that if they get catcalled, the next step is the brutal murder and rape. And that is obviously going to frighten people in a way that I don't think is necessary. But I also think it's a pretty desperate situation where the only way that governments or politicians, or in this instance, the Law Commission, but I think the government will be open to this suggestion, when the only way they can think of it exhibiting what they think to be morally right and wrong, or behaviour they think is antisocial, is to try and make it illegal. There's going to criminalise an awful lot of people potentially.
And also there is a way of which society can deal with these things about what is considered to be socially acceptable or unacceptable. And certainly in my day as a younger woman, I remember being intensely angered by catcalling and wolf whistling and shouting out about I'm not entirely sure why the size of my breast is any business of a random van driver passing by. And he certainly always heard about my views very, very quickly soon after, as did any scaffolder. But I was like that from 16 onwards and was quite happy to stand up to these men. But I can understand why women don't, and they almost by definition, someone who's shouting at a complete stranger is somebody perhaps you don't want to be reckoning with, because they're already behaving in frankly a strange way compared to most men. But we do need to focus on the fact that it's not most men, it's a small minority of men who do this. And perhaps what we need is just more of a societal pushback. Hey, what are you doing? Why are you shouting at that woman? And people feeling that they will be backed up by the law if there is any trouble, but that they feel they can speak out themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I want young women to be able to, as it will, call back. But you're right that people, young women in particular, might feel a bit intimidated about doing that.
You and I take any comers, but
exactly. But I think a context is quite important in this, because the general sense of this pestering, as it's described, also describes what are not malign actions. I mean, we're discussing catcalling, but this very vague and nebulous pestering or sexual pestering, or making a praise that or unwanted. I mean, that actually really steps over a boundary where the law is intervening in interpersonal relations. Because sometimes, I started off describing boorish behaviour, and we've said the word lewd, but sometimes it can be people, even if it's misplaced, doing a kind of crass chat-up line, right? It can be somebody sort of saying, "What are you doing tonight, love?" Or "You look very nice in that dress." And you might think it's naff, might not be what you would want, but it's not always from a place from a place where it's based on being a threat to women. And that's the way it's posed. My concern in the midst of this is that we have a situation where young women are being preached through the law that they are constantly under threat.
And that they're victims.
Always that they're victims. And that this idea, as you said, is that it's a widespread phenomenon that men are out to harm you. And I think that's actually a very dangerous lesson. But it's also the case that I think it's a misuse of the law. And as I've said, I think that the law is increasingly being used now to intervene in the way that we relate to each other. And that gives the state an enormous amount of power. It also means that the police, who I think at the moment are not, covered in pride when it comes to serious instances of women being actually physically attacked, or indeed any crime being dealt with, are going to now be swamped, I think, with more trivial offences, which might be unpleasant, but which, as you say, can be dealt with through social norms.
Absolutely. Oh, you always talk too much sense. They'll never catch on, but thank God you are in at least our upper chamber to give some sense to them. Baroness Claire Fox, an independent peer